Okay, now that we've got our template in pretty good shape here, let's take a look at our style guide. And what we see is it's broken. And that's because we've not applied any of the changes that we've made to the template to the style guide page. And so we've talked a little bit in some of our reading and in some of our videos here about what constitutes the theme of a website or the skin of a website. And that's the stuff that should be the same on every page, should be in the same place, it should look the same, it should have the same content. And pretty much all of that's going to be within the navigation, right? The header and the footer, but also the way that the main content is treated. It doesn't make a lot of sense to go from having this centered content kind of in the middle of the page to having it go all the way to the edge, have no background color. That disrupts the user experience to where it's much more difficult for a user to understand the content that's being delivered to them if the user experience changes on every page. And so what we have to do now, since we're still using just plain vanilla HTML to create our website, is we need to update that. So let's see. Where did it go? Oh, it looks like I closed out of my project. So let me open it back up real quick. And so now we can see all these changes that we made to the template by adding skeleton, adding all of these classes. And if I also open up my style guide, you can see that none of those changes are there. So basically the stuff that needs to be the same on every single page between these two pages is everything above the main element and everything below the main element. And what we can do to make that work out really easily, and what we should do at this point, is just copy everything from line 1 of our template all the way to when the main element opens. Although in this case, I would argue that I actually need this div with a class of row and this 12 column for my style guide as well. So I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to move to my style guide page and I'm going to replace everything up to the opening main element with that. And since that disrupts the nesting of my code, I'm also going to grab all of my content for my style guide and just move it in to rest to be a child of this 12 column div. And then I'm going to come back to my template and I'm going to do the same thing when the main element closes. So just before the main element closes, my 12 column div closes and my row div closes. So I really need to add those into the main, element of the style guide as well. So we'll copy that all the way to the end. And then I'm going to replace the closing main element all the way to the end for the style guide page. And by doing that, come back here, my style guide page is going to look a lot better. You see now it's starting to follow the same look as the template to where everything just looks a lot more consistent now. So we expect all of these things to behave the same and to be in the same place as part of the theme of a website or as part of the overarching aesthetic and user experience of the website. So in doing that, I did break something though. Notice now that my description is back to my generic template description for my style guide page, and my page title is back to my generic. So what I need to do is make sure I update that. The template should have those generic descriptions, by the way, but the style guide is an actual page on the website, so I need to update this. Say website style guide. And then the content of my description should also change. Now the name of this meta always needs to equal description, just like the name of this meta always needs to equal viewport. That's not the part we can customize. The content is the part that we can customize. And so here I just need to follow the instructions I was given to describe the page using a complete sentence of around 155 characters. And remember that this appears in search engine results, so I should make it something that someone might actually want to visit. So the Just something that describes it. Again, you can do this in your own words, but just describe what a website style guide should be, what it should be for. And once we do that, we just want to save our changes. And let's take a look at it now. And now we see our title is actually Website Style Guide. And when we take a look at the description, we can see that it's actually describing a style guide instead of boilerplate content. But this should really be the only thing that's different in everything above the main element and below the main element in the style guide and the template. Should be these 2 lines of text right here. That's really it. So now that we've done that, we can come in and we can take a little bit of time to create a little bit more boilerplate on our template, and then we can apply some of that boilerplate to our style guide to make the page aesthetic look a little bit nicer. So let's come back to Sublime Text here, and let's make sure we're working in our template. And what I want to do is actually create just a few pieces of code that I can use later as I'm building pages. Since I'm already working with Skeleton right now, and I have, pretty good context for it right now, something that I could use later when maybe I haven't been working with it as much. And so what I'm going to do is within my main element on my template, I'm going to create some code for a 1-column layout, for a 2-column layout, and for a 3-column layout that I can use. Now I've already got the 1-column layout really, with the 12 columns here that's containing all the H1, H2, H3, all of this. So I could use that as my single column layout, but I probably want to describe that in some way here. So let's come back to that. But what we need to do now is we're going to have different layouts within this main element. So we're going to need more than one row because the rows need to wrap each different layout, right? So for a 1-column layout, that needs to have a 12-column div that is wrapped in a row. And then a 2-column layout needs to have 2 column divs that add up to 12. They don't have to be even. It doesn't have to be 6 and 6, but they do need to add up to 12. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to come down here below this 12-column div where it closes, and actually beneath this row as well. And I'm going to open up a new row. And then I'm going to make sure to close that row before I forget. And just above this, I'm going to put the comment of code for single column layout. And I'm going to comment that out so that it's just a note to myself. And then I'm going to put under where this row div closes a comment that says ends code for single column layout. And now within this row, I'm going to add just some boilerplate for a single column layout. So we already know how to do that. We just need a div with a class equal to 12 columns. And then I need to make sure I close that before I forget. So again, I could probably stand to have these comments here. So I could just copy paste them this time instead of recreating them. And then inside this 12-column div, I just need to put something, right? So I could put an H2 that reads this is the code for a 1-column layout. Probably ought to say single column. And then underneath that, a paragraph that describes how to achieve that, right? To make a single column layout. I need a row that contains one div that spans all 12 columns of the of the grid. And I can put some spaces in here so that I can see what's happening here a little bit more easily. So what you see here is the first row that I opened up opens up here, right? And the first 12 column div. And they both close here at the end of this content. And now I'm creating a second area here that has a row and then a 12 column div. And I'm keeping everything still inside of main, so it's all still going to be in that white space on the page. But now I can add, I'm going to just modify this. So I'm going to take this all the way from the comment of code for single column layout to where it ends. I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to change this to code for 2 column layout and ends code for 2 column layout. But I'm going to have to change this. So within this row, if I want a 2 column layout, I need 2 separate containers. They don't have to be divs, but they probably will be. And they need to each span some division of that 12 columns, right? So it could be 6 and 6, or it could be 3 and 9, it could be 8 and 4. As long as they both add up to 12, it's fine. So what I can do real quickly is just copy all the code for this column div. I need to keep it inside the row. So this is going to have 2 divs inside a row. And they cannot be 12 columns each. They have to be something that adds up to 12. So I'm going to do 6 and 6 because that's the easiest. And I'm going to make sure that I change my references to a 12 column div right here and right here, because now these are 6 column divs. And then I just need to change this is the code for a 2 column layout. And to make a 2 column layout, I need a row that contains 2 divs that span columns of the grid that add up to 12. Something like that. That's really not the most clear description. You could probably describe it better. But I'm going to copy that whole paragraph's content and just paste that here. And let's stop and take a quick look so you can see what you're getting here. Let's see, that's the style guide page, so I need to move back to the template. And you see now I'm getting these headings of this is the code for a single column layout. To make a single column layout, I need a row that contains 1 div that spans all 12 columns of the grid. This is the code for a 2 column layout. To make a 2 column layout, I need a row that contains 2 divs that span columns of the grid that add up to 12. So you can see where we're going with this, to where we could make a 3 column one as well. Before we get too far with this, I want you to add one more thing to your style sheet that just helps you to be able to see this taking place. I think it helps to be able to see it in action. So I'm going to move to my style sheet here in my sources tab of the developer tools, and up at the very top where my global styles start, we are going to add a kind of selector that we don't use very often at all as a global style or a wildcard selector. So I'm going to create another comment here in my style sheet that says temporary styles delete or comment out when not testing. And then I'm just going to add a CSS comment around that so they're not in the way. And I'm going to use a wildcard selector here that's going to select pretty much anything that has a class of column or columns. So I'm going to choose to write, I need a dot there, of column, and then comma, dot, columns, multiple. And I'm just going to give them a border. So I'm going to type border, and on a border property you can actually declare several things at once. I'm going to declare it to be solid, black, and thin. And you see now that's just putting a temporary style where it's drawing a boundary around all of my columns so I can see how they move. So it kind of helps to be able to see everything that's going on here. Now we could additionally, if there was more that, if it was helpful to you, you could also create another temporary style that grabbed everything that has a class of row. So we could grab anything that had a class of row and do the same thing. We'll give it a border of, and this time we could stick with thin and solid, but we could do a different color from black and maybe do green. Right. And maybe instead of black here, we do teal or something like that. Right. And so now you can start to see these divisions here where you can see anything that's in a row. It's kind of hard to see the row. Let's try dashed instead of solid, or possibly even a double line border. And let's maybe go something that's a little bit more, let's do red for rows and maybe blue for columns. And that way you can start to see how these things are grouped, and you can see where the rows are wrapping around as well as where the columns are wrapping around. And of course, this is just for testing. This is just to help you kind of learn what you're looking at. And so as you don't need these anymore, you would want to come back and make sure that you comment those out so that your site looks good. But I want to see these in here so that I know that you have actually added them. And now that we've got this, let's go ahead and do the code for a 3-column layout. But what I want you to do is try to do it on your own first. And then we'll pick up in another video where we wrap that up. I'll give you the solution, and I'll also show you how we can apply it on the style guide page to create a more unique layout.